Hello and welcome to another SSCIT report. My name is Chobo Swaggins, aka Jealous from Team Liquid, and today we'll be reviewing some recommended replays and taking a look at the current top of the Basal ladder, Stardust. Made by the creator of Locutus, it has been a frequent topic of discussion in the Discord, and today we will be looking at what makes it so powerful. But first, let's dive into the recommendations. Over here in the top left, we have Proxy, and at the top right, mid right, we have Insanity Bot. So this is a TVZ on Icarus. Icarus, somewhat known for its relatively small mains, which may be an especially large problem for Terran players on this map because of factories, add-ons, and so on, and maybe even more so to AI, given the fact that we have seen already that it's quite difficult to program to, how should we say, distribute buildings in a way that makes them make sense and fit together well on maps, even as big as Fighting Spirit. So here with the extra space on the top and below the command center, it's going to be interesting to see how Insanity Bot is going to place its units and buildings here. In the meantime, on the top left we have Proxy, which is going for, it looks like, a 9 pool speed build. So yeah, maybe it was overpool speed. Sorry about that. Let's bring back up that menu. There's the production. We are seeing Zerglings coming out as expected. Are we going to see speed soon? I'm guessing that we will. And what is this building? It's a Hydra Den. One base Hydra? Or is it one? Well, it's most likely one base Lurker, isn't it? The Zerglings are actually, instead of going out to attack, they're tasked with defending against any scouting, which is a very interesting decision here. I believe that it would have had some success if it decided to be aggressive with those Zerglings, but preventing the scouting information from telling the opponent that it is going to be most likely Lurker is probably just as important, if not more important, than doing damage. And we see that Insanity Bot is following up with a factory, which means that it most likely won't have detection anytime soon. Normally, you would have some sort of going, if you're going for Marine Medic, you would have Engineering Bay or Academy much earlier, but with a factory, things are different. But now the Zerglings are coming forward, and they've actually succeeded in pushing back the Marines all the way back to the main base of the Terran player, and SCVs are being pulled to try to wall against the Zerglings. Nice micro here, kiting with the Marines, but I don't think it's going to be enough with only 1 or 2 Marines at a time. Oh, nice wall here on the Marines, but the SCVs seem to abandon their gunned partners a little bit too early, pulled back just a little bit, and this Vulture is going to stall out this aggression. Meanwhile, it's now the second hatchery is being put down by Proxy. No Hydralisks out on the map, no Lurkers either, so that is quite an interesting choice for a build. One thing that you should always have to consider with Zerg is utilization in terms of your drones. So the earlier you build if you make a building early but don't use it for a while, you've effectively cost yourself an economy. So in this case, having made the Hydra Den so early but not having produced anything out of it, I believe that it definitely damaged the economy of the Zerg player. The Vultures here decide to stick around and try to pick off some extra drones, but with the Sunken coming up and Hydralisk coming out, they are forced to return back to the main base. It would have been interesting to see maybe a run-by here. We've seen bots do run-bys in the past, and now the choice to go mech actually seems to pan out quite well for the Terran player, as tanks and mines are a good counter to Hydras, especially before layer tech. And these forward Sunkens are not going to be able to do much to stop the tanks from pushing in. However, the Sunkens that are active are going to be able to take down at least one tank, and it looks like it's focusing on the tanks. This tank stays alive, but in the meantime, the Vultures have killed quite a number of drones. And now the mines are showing their value here as they take out 2 Hydralisks, and drones continue to be hemorrhaged. The Hydralisk not opting to engage, maybe conserving health, and the mine takes it out in the end anyway. Behind this, we see that Insanity Bot has expanded, and let me slow it down just a little bit so I can keep up with this game. We have a third base coming up here for the Zerg player, quite standard play now, ironically, but with the Vultures continuing to push forward with mines and no Overlords anywhere nearby to stop them, these drones are going to continue to be lost pretty much without any say by the Zerg player. And more army seems to be coming out for the Terran player, but it's not deciding to move out anywhere. Drones are being used as scouts as well. Quite an interesting choice here. Maybe they're just patrolling back and forth to defend their base from any aggression. And here's what I kind of expected to happen, is the fact that the factories will go up here. But I do want to note that these depots and other auxiliary buildings are being placed up against the wall. This is something that I asked in the Discord recently. I said, why don't bots do this? And I was pointed to some maps where it would actually be impossible because the mains don't touch the walls. But here, we can see it being used to great effect, giving a lot of breathing room in the main base for the Terran player. Now with siege mode out, the Terran player is going to be even more effective against the Zerg opponent here. And mines being laid on top of eggs. Oh my goodness! Oh, he managed to get the army out somehow. The army was in definite danger of getting mine dragged into its own death, but no such thing is going to happen here right now. Hydralisks being forced to stay away, too few in number to stop the aggression from the Terran player as it continues to send more vultures and mech forward. I expect to see the Terran player capitalize on its advantage now to climb up the ramp here, sieging up underneath the ramp, very low surface area in case there were any Zerglings to come out. Great play here. Hydralisks keep trying to push in against the tanks, but the tanks are too well positioned and surrounded by mines. This is a really great push by Insanity Bot. And the kiting from the units here, trying to avoid damage, drawing hits with the Marine maybe to save the mech units, which are much more valuable in this scenario, and this slow push of death is going to eventually, it seems, eliminate the main base from the Zerg player with no way up, no safe path up this ramp for the Zerg player. No tech at its third base, all of its tech locked in place here, and the hatchery being pummeled down. And what we saw here was a great example of what I had mentioned earlier, which is, you know, drone utilization and building buildings before you have any actual use for them. And a combination of great control from the Terran player, mine laying, marine kiting, siege tank pushing, just fantastic play all around from the Terran player. If the Zerg player had maybe, since it wasn't going for Lurker, as we found out, it could have used those first few Zerglings to its advantage by attacking the Terran player. But I do think that one base Lurker would have been an interesting play in this scenario. Something that, with the Zerglings defending against any scouting, would have been able to ensure would go unnoticed by the opponent. And against mech, a fast Lurker build could actually be quite dangerous. But it seems that this game is all but over, and Insanity Bot has proven to be victorious. Last few Hydralisks here get eaten by mines. The last drone trying to expand goes down here, and the addition of a Wraith will remove any Overlords as the Terran player progresses into a full mech composition, staying on two bases and looking to basically just end the game here. Drones continuously looking desperately for an expansion. Quite a few minerals banked up, but unfortunately now no more drones and really nothing left to do in this game for Proxy, and the game ends. Thank you for this submission. Next up, we will have Adiaz, another top performer on the ladder, against Egbert, who I casted not too long ago, playing as the Terran player on the top right. I just want to show you guys real quick the cross table for the basal ladder, just to show you what I'm talking about. So this is Stardust now. Stardust is clearly at the top, and the only person that it has a losing record against is in fact Adiaz. So it's going to be interesting to see what makes this AI so strong. We did cast a game of them playing TVT last week, which was a fantastic game. So, well, not last week. Last time I casted, it was TVT on Andromeda. So let's see how it performs against Egbert here in yet another TVT. Spotting on the left position in Tau Cross, we have Adiaz, and on the top right, we have the Brown Terran Egbert. Egbert sending out the early SCV scout. This is something we saw in its game against it. I believe it was on Luna. They cross scouted with an SCV very early, and I thought that it might be a BBS. This was actually from my first cast for this channel, but the SCV is only here just to gather intel, find out where the information is. Actually, it looks like it's doing a bit of harassment as well, but it does go down eventually, this without taking any gains from its aggression. Similar to the situation with the Zerg drone utilization that I was discussing last time, sending out an early SCV seems like a good idea in general because you get more information, and if you have good reactions as an AI, that could definitely benefit you. But in general, you're losing a lot of your economy by sending out an SCV so early. when you send out your first mate SCV, that is 20% of your economy. So that sets you definitely sets you back, and it's something that, and especially in a mirror matchup, could snowball out of control. But looking at the builds, we do see Adia's going for a very standard 1 Rax gas and most likely a factory follow-up after this. But on the other hand, we have Egbert going for 2 Racks off of 1 base here. So definitely an uncommon choice in TVT, and it does get fully scouted by Adia's before any Marines are out to prevent the information from being gathered. But is this going to be bunker, command center maybe? It's going to be a command center. This is actually an interesting choice. This is a build that at least I personally use and I've seen in 2v2, where you go 2 Rax Marines because there's often a Zerg opponent, so you want to be safe against that. And then you go straight into a command center and then into mech. In the meantime, we do have Adia's with 1 factory going for a vulture. We've seen this before on the Andromeda game, and it is going for a command center of its own with a bunker of its own as well. Interestingly, no bunker for Egbert here, so the vulture may be able to fire off a few shots, but in low numbers, Marines are still good enough to take on a single vulture, especially with 4 of them here. The bunker is going to be placed now, but it is not going to be in time for the vulture. Let's see the micro here from the vulture. Nice kiting. It's, I think, 3 Marines on 1 hit each. Yes, it is. And all 3 Marines go down, but that buys time for the bunker. I'm not sure why this Marine decided that it wants to fight outside of it, but either way, the vulture, this time notably, does not try to climb back up the ramp to continue its harassment. In the Andromeda game, it did perish. I wonder if that's a change that was made, or if that was just a fluke last time. Siege tanks now on the way, second gas for Adia's. Very, very standard TVT style play. And I believe that this will be an armory, and this may be an academy. Let's find out. Armory and academy, that is correct. And meanwhile here we have an academy, and we're now going into factory. So kind of 2 very different approaches to the matchup, resulting in both players having 2 bases, but notably the same amount of workers despite the early economic hit that Egbert took. Now finally Adia's is climbing forward a little bit. Interesting to note how saturated this natural base is. The main is actually undersaturated, relatively speaking, and that's partially because of the fact that it has 4 SCVs building at the time. Maybe over-transferred the number of workers to the natural. If we compare the saturation with Adia's, Adia's has a much more, much looser saturation in the main base, but more in the main, and that's where most of your SCVs will be pulled from in order to build buildings. However, there are 1 SCV here looking to repair the bunker, perhaps. 3 SCVs here just kind of chilling with the army. I'm not sure exactly what they're for. Maybe, oh, of course, they're the repair SCVs. We saw this in the Andromeda game. And this is like almost like a StarCraft 2 type of composition where you have the, but the roles are kind of reversed, where mech is the definitely far more standard choice in Brood War, and Marine Medic far less standard choice. But it's going to be interesting in low numbers of tanks. Marine Medic can actually fare decently, but now that we're climbing up to 7 tanks out on the map, 8 tanks out on the map, I feel like M&M have completely lost any aggressive potential in this situation. It's going to depend on army management though. Without any supporting units, will the Marine Medic run up on top of the tanks? And the tanks are actually trickling in 1 by 1, and we see how Marine Medic can actually combat this here. Because of the trickle of tanks, the tank count has actually dropped precipitously. The Marine Medics being traded for tanks was actually a fantastic trade, and now the tank advantage actually goes to Egbert. Egbert does have 2 factories producing. There's 4 factories for Adia's, but both on only 2 add-ons. This is actually the appropriate amount for 2 gases. And now positioning, which is so crucial in TVT, the advantage goes to Egbert, who is going to post up outside the natural of Adia's. But Adia's is no stranger to this situation. Adia's has been here before. Is going to use repairing SCVs to repair the tanks, but looks like the Marine Medics are actually too strong for it. The bunker is going to go down to the pressure from the siege tanks, and this push, quite unexpectedly, is going to actually pan out quite well for Egbert, and it has a commanding position now in the natural of Adia's, who despite his worker lead is now contained to only 1 base, oversaturated, and the push just keeps coming from Egbert, unstoppable. And this is just an example of how, you know, a tough moment here, this path, the not maybe unideal, less than ideal movement and sieging of Adia's actually potentially costed that engagement, and allowed for the Marine Medic composition with the support of just a few tanks to push back a far more dangerous army from the other Terran player. These tanks are actually quite low, so it's possible that it will stabilize in its main base, but with a container near this narrow choke here, I think it's only a matter of time before Egbert really starts pumping the gas here, and we already see the fact that it is more than double in supply, taking its third base, has the science facility added. Just a quick snapshot of what I was talking about base distribution. But yes, this game is all but over, and now with Science Vessel out, and yes, this is just, I think this game is now officially over. Very well done here by Egbert. Really nice play. A far cry from the very comical, almost Benny Hill-like game we saw from it on Jade. That was the map that we were watching this on. Yes, Jade. Again, I want to point out this base layout situation where it seems like it divided the base into a kind of like a sort of a grid, where even if you can fit a whole factory here, it just fits one depot and then another factory slash depot, factory slash depot, factory slash depot. It almost seems to be treating all the buildings relatively the same in terms of weight, which in turn makes for, first of all, very difficult pathing. Thankfully, it has its factories on the front, but if you have a factory back here, the tanks would have to move down this way, kind of like that peg game where like the ball goes down between the pegs and stuff. Um, but yeah, it's just an example of the different ways that people have gotten around to coding for their bases, and we see that this maybe could be tweaked a little bit with the depots taking up so much room in the main base. In contrast, Adia's building placement was actually quite sensible in my mind. You know, factories positioned in such a way such that add-ons on the right, factories without add-ons to the left, very economical in terms of space. Maybe positioning not so great given the location of the exit to the base, but still quite interesting. And of course, the depots and tech being still stacked up here. It's actually in TVT. You see it less often. You see more generally this kind of spacing. Part of the reason being is that if you get siege tank dropped, you're bound to lose a lot more of your tech and depots if that happens when they're stacked up together, thanks to splash damage. But maybe that's exactly what Egbert was thinking about when they were programming these depot positions. Anyway, enough talk about that game. Thank you for the recommendation. And now, as I said before, we will be going into the Stardust games. Look at this dominant position that it has on the ladder, winning records against all but one AI at the moment. And so let's take a look at the first game we have from Stardust. Stardust spawning here on Heartbreak Ridge as the purple Protoss on the left, and it's against Sijazu, who I believe was in a broadcast last week by Nightcat on Destination. Here it's going to be the orange Zerg on the right of Heartbreak Ridge. And one thing that has been a topic of discussion on the Discord is the build that Stardust uses against Zergs, which is, and slight spoiler warning, but we're going to get there in just a moment, it was reported to be 4-gate Dragoon and incredibly difficult to stop. Part of the reason why that is because even though Dragoons are not that great in human versus human play, against AI, there's a two-part problem where, first of all, Zerglings are apparently difficult to code for in terms of handling Dragoons. You know, surrounds, backstabs, flanks, all those things that humans take for granted are difficult for AI to do. Meanwhile, for Protoss, the Dragoon micro, which is basically kiting, I feel like it's potentially much easier to code for and much more effective as a result. 2 Zealots are out now, and this is actually a quite risky decision. I mean, it does start with 2 gates, which is not so bad. I believe 2 gates going into 4-gate Dragoon is a safer play, especially on a map without a ramp like this. But 2 Zealots are already enough to make Sijazu reconsider this aggression. And now with 4 Zealots intimidatingly pacing back and forth in front of its entrance are definitely going to be enough to hold a vast number of Zerglings here. And I love this concave that it built for itself. If it just made it a little bit tighter, that might have been best. And now it looks like they're thinking about moving out. So this is actually going to be 2-gate Zealot into 4-gate Dragoon. I want to take a quick look at what our Zerg player is doing here. It looks like this is going to be a second hatchery, so 2 hatch production pure Zergling, which in theory should hold up decently against Dragoons as if it gets speed as well with it, and it's actually 3 hatch production. But with this amount of Zealots, they'll be able to soak up quite a few hits from the Zerglings before they can get to any of the Dragoons that are out on the map. And here we see the 4 gates are coming up indeed for the Protoss player Stardust. And these Zerglings are just checking in once in a while, making sure to see what kind of army production is there, but it's constant Zergling production with no speed at the moment. And I don't, if we look at these armies side by side, I think we can quite confidently say that 4-gate Dragoon should be able to take out this number of slow Zerglings, even with a perfect surround, just given the amount of Zealots that are out on the map. And now we're actually going into 5 gateways on one base. I wonder if it's judging the amount of Zerglings that are out in order to determine the fact that there must not be very much economy from the Zerg player, so therefore it's safe to, one base Protoss' advantage against one base Zerg, just on average. The Zealots are kind of moving far away from the Dragoons, which is not the best, but they are still great in numbers, so the Zerglings are going to be forced back. Taking advantage of this hill for a moment to get a few stray hits, but unfortunately the Zergling numbers are continuously going down one by one. And off of a one base economy, this is especially devastating. Still no speed yet for these Zerglings, and now Dragoons circling back from both sides, and now their number is actually quite large. But Sunkens have been placed in anticipation of this. The Dragoons, looks like they bugged out behind the Zealot, perhaps. They could potentially take this down, especially they should be interested in doing so, given the fact that these 3 colonies are still colonies and not sunken colonies. And behind this, it is expanding, which is a great use of its map control. But again, it's just the threat. The number of these Dragoons seems to be the factor that puts Stardust, makes them so difficult to handle for the Zerg player. Sunkens now have completed, so it's getting more difficult for Stardust to take a good engagement against these Sunkens, especially with this narrow choke here, which I believe as soon as they start stepping on the creep, they should be getting hit by these sunken colonies. However, the Dragoon number continues to rise, and eventually there will be enough potentially to bust down these Sunkens. Zerglings are trickling forward, checking on the army, losing quite a few at a time. It's so crucial for it to maintain its numbers at this moment. It is, however, on its layer tech, and it looks like this may be a Hydralisk den. Let's double check. No, it's a Spire. So in a few moments, this might actually be dangerous, but actually cannons have already been placed on the mineral line for the Protoss player, and oh, now we're going to see the big bust. Dragoons coming in slowly, trickling in forward. The Zerglings not committing. The Zerglings need to commit while the Sunkens are still up. Zerglings are being slightly undecisive, but the spreading from the Dragoons is done very well here. The Dragoons spreading, kiting, dancing back and forth, targeting the Sunkens, which is a great move. Moving forward just to take a few shots, then falling back, and the Zerg has actually managed to hold this first onslaught barely by the skin of his teeth, with quite a healthy number of Zerglings, but I believe there are still slow Zerglings here. And looking at what the numbers are for the Protoss player, if we look at its production tab, it is vastly outpacing the Zerg. Supply is more than double at this point, and it looks like the one base gambit from Silja has not played off. Sijaju has not paid off here. Sorry, yet again. The Spire is done, but no Mutalisks are being produced. It's only making drones, and now with a vastly decreased defensive capability, and Stardust continuing to expand and take bases, it seems like it's going to be only a matter of time. Stardust now on a full 8 gates producing pure Dragoons. The Zerglings are actually getting a great trade because the Dragoons can't kite through this wall. It looks like they might be a little bit confused by the pathing of the map, but their numbers are still too great. The Zerglings are unupgraded in every sense of the word, and it seems that this Zerg may not have long for this world. Hydra Den is being put down, but unfortunately it's too late to accomplish anything, and now the Dragoons are going to rain havoc on the Zerg base, and that is how the 4-gate Dragoon, well, 2-gate Zealot into 4-gate Dragoon seems to be dominating the ladder at the moment. It would be interesting to see perhaps more PvZ replays to see how other Zergs handle this. I've had discussions about this in the Discord. I've personally suggested going for 3-hatch Hydralisk with a fast expansion, partially because going for 12 hatch is actually favored against 2-gate builds that are inside the main base and not proxied, so definitely something to consider for our bot writers. It also seems that some Protoss players from the replays I've seen, they take a very defensive opening because of bots like Chris Cox, which go 4-pool every game. I've seen a replay earlier today where the AI went Pylon Forge, Cannon, just to hold that initial aggression. I'm not sure if that's because it knew it was facing Chris Cox or not, but either way, going for a 12 hatch in that scenario is definitely advantageous for the Zerg player. So It's going to be interesting to see the developments and how people try to adjust to code for Stardust's army heavy openings in PvZ. Moving on, we're going to have another Stardust replay, and this time it's against Krasio on Roadrunner. We have Stardust as the yellow Protoss here on the right, and Krasio as the purple Terran on the left. And fun fact, I played this AI a couple of months ago. I spoke to Krasio and he suggested that I give it a few goes, and I got absolutely clobbered on this map by Krasio because of its defensive play. I had gone for 1 Gateway, 2 Zealots into Proxy Reaver. So despite the fact that I got some initial damage done with the Zealots and proxied the Reaver and got quite a bit of economic damage done as well, its safe, measured play combined with the fact that it can produce SCVs nonstop actually put it into an economic advantage in the mid game. And in the late game, it just had a monstrous army pushing from both the north and the south onto my natural here, and I got rolled. So I'm very excited to see how Stardust handles Krasio on this map. Krasio, it seems, is this going to be a forward barracks? No, I think it might have been checking for proxies. Maybe the barracks seems kind of late. Oh, it's actually a 13 command center. Very, very greedy build here from Krasio. Perhaps recognizing the fact that the Protoss player is all the way across the map from itself, but the Protoss player is going for 2 Gate Zealots. Very uncommon choice in PvT, and kind of puts a timer on the efficacy of these first 2 gateways, because against 14 oh, whoa, the 14 command center has been cancelled, maybe as a response to seeing that second gateway. Actually, I'm not sure if I like that decision. It's definitely possible to bunker and wall in the natural here against a 2 gate, but perhaps opting to play safer, as I mentioned earlier, Krasio decides to just go for a late Rax, late gas, which it does put it behind, but going 2 gate puts the Protoss behind as well. It is getting its Cybernetics core now, imaginably getting range. Let's see, no, research seems to be not showing up for us, and we see that because of the delays, it's actually going to have range done before a factory is done for the Terran player, which is obviously the Dragoons are going to be more effective for quite some time, and they are going to be getting produced in large numbers. Again, we're seeing 4 Gate Dragoon from Stardust, perhaps, and again, this is a build that was quite popular in SC2 at one point, so maybe that's where part of the inspiration is coming from. Maybe it's also the fact that Dragoons are just so good in the hands of a well-trained AI. The SCV here, this is one thing that I've noticed about Krasio. I love the way that it baits with SCVs and runs around the map. It works against human players too. These Marines on the ramp, they're immediately going to retreat to the bunker, but a bunker alone with no wall on the ramp is not going to be able to hold off against this amount of units. So many SCVs are being pulled. The repairable surface area is actually being minimized by the Zealots. The Zealots do relent and fall back though. But with 6 Dragoons now, I imagine that our run-by would actually be totally feasible. It runs to stand right on top of the bunker. First siege tank is out. Is it going to be able to hold this pressure? It has to unsiege to move for a little bit forward, and now I believe that the Terran player will be able to hold, but so much economy has been lost throughout this whole entire time. Siege tank, interestingly enough, not deciding to push any forward, perhaps wary of any Dragoon run-by that does happen. SCVs here seem poised to block the ramp if it does occur, but in the meantime, the Protoss player, and by the way, beautiful use of probes bringing the minerals back here right when the Nexus finishes. The Protoss is now on 2 base and is going to have an economic advantage, and now with this amount of Dragoons and so many SCVs pulled for so long, only 1 siege tank, it seems difficult to believe that the Terran will be able to hold this even with great repairs on the bunker and the siege tank, and the Dragoons are continuing to push up. It looks like the SCVs might have blocked it a little bit, so a couple of Dragoons go down, but keep in mind that the economic advantage from the Protoss player is going to continue piling up, as the Terran is barely holding on to dear life here, actually. Stardust, a full 10 workers ahead, nearly 30 supply. And now with 2 siege tanks here, it should breathe a sigh of relief, but this is just evidence of what happens when you delay your factory, when you're forced to cancel that command center against a Protoss opponent, what kind of damage you put yourself in. But just as good as Dragoon kiting is, Terran slow pushing with siege tanks, very good with AI that I've seen so far, and Krasio is no slouch in that department as well. Looks like these vultures are taking a few extra hits. It seems like Krasio does want to expand. It's going to slowly push its way outwards, but look at this beautiful concave from the Protoss player here. It's almost 270 degrees. Unfortunately, of course, it can't engage exactly through this bridge, but it's making life very difficult for Krasio, who has to push extremely slowly to take his natural and catch up in the economic department. In the meantime, we see a full 7 gates from the Protoss player, and now, with the ramp blocking the siege tanks from going down further as well, feels like it's taking some time for Krasio to figure out this situation. The SCVs are also blocking the ramp a little bit. It's slowing down its expansion even further. It is up to 2 armories, 3 factories, but that is basically all it can support off of 1 gas. And it needs that second command center as soon as possible. It has been saving the minerals for it. It's at 500 almost constantly, but now the Dragoon count is very high. It's going to try to push these tanks back, lower the tank count so that to pretty much reset the situation, knowing that it can reproduce Dragoons easier than the tank can. Then the tank count can be redeemed, and actually it's going to push all the way up the ramp. What a destructive push here from Stardust, just shoving Dragoons through the ramp of Krasio. And again, SCVs are pulled, being forced to repair the bunker. The Protoss is losing Dragoons, but with no army for the enemy to even threaten a counterattack, this is a very wise investment off of 4 bases from Stardust. And now with no army to defend and so many Dragoons in the main base, SCVs falling down, it seems like this game is almost over as well. Yep, it seems like this will be over quite soon. And Stardust takes a game against the Terran player, ending the game with 5 bases, actually, and quite a number of gateways. And I just do want to note that this is some beautiful base layout here. Dragoons can come out of every gateway that you can see, which is obviously crucial for an AI that focuses so heavily on Dragoon production. The tech is tucked away in the back of the base, pretty compactly. The gateways have plenty of walking room around them. The forge doesn't actually prevent anything from coming out, anything from being blocked, and perhaps it was a recognition of the fact that if a second gateway would still allow for Dragoons here, but this makes this Dragoon pop out downwards, so that's an interesting consideration if that is the case. Cannons at every base to defend against vulture harassment, which we've seen some AI be very, very, very annoying with, and I've personally experienced it myself. And yeah, just in general, a very solid PvT brute force play from Stardust here. Moving on into PvP for Stardust, we have Banana Brain in the top left, which we saw also in my last broadcast playing against, I believe it was Locutus. Very interesting game that was on La Mancha. And Stardust, let's get the game started. Stardust on the top right here as the blue Protoss on Fighting Spirit, facing off against Banana Brain as the purple Protoss on the top left here. Now, Banana Brain also famously no slouch in PvP, or in any matchup for that matter. Banana Brain very strong and playable on the Snail ladder as well. I should point out also that I spoke to the creator of the Stardust AI and on Discord in the public channels, and he said that we will be able to play against Stardust, I think he said October, or maybe it was September. We'll be able to play against Stardust on Snail as well. It'll be interesting to see how the current top dog of the AI world fares against us. Now, PvP, both players scouting downwards and almost at the same time, and we see 1 gateway opening from both players, very standard. Nothing unexpected here. Are the probes going to do a high 5 here? High 5? No, the Banana Brain probe avoids the blue one. It would be interesting to see if that could be something that's coded for, because as a human, if I saw that, I would know immediately to just go scout the opponent here, because the timing of the scouting is too perfect. If their timing is exactly the same as yours, that means that they're in a mirror position on the map, on a map like FS at least. So we're seeing 1 Zealot gas here and 1 Zealot gas here. The gas finishing a little bit earlier for Banana Brain. Let's bring up that production tab. It's actually because Banana Brain is going for a second Zealot. I believe there's only been 1 Zealot for Stardust, which explains the earlier gas, perhaps. The Zealot is coming forward, both of them, going to apply pressure to the ramp. It's interesting that Banana Brain did not choose to actually pressure the Zealot, because given the fact that it knows that it has 2, this might have been a good engagement to take, because soon enough the Dragoon will be out. It was waiting for 2 Zealots though, so that's not all is lost, and it does still have a probe in here. There's potential for a lot of damage to be done to the mineral line here. 1 probe goes down. 2 probes go down, and the purple Protoss decides to pull back here after taking down 2 probes, which is a good pickoff for it. Let's see if this probe was going to survive. No, it's just going to stay outside the range of Dragoons. And it seems like we're seeing a very familiar situation here where Stardust is going to start making Dragoons. Except in this case, it's actually quite expected. And interestingly enough, Banana Brain is actually up to 3 gateways already, and it wasn't able to prevent the scout from Stardust. So Stardust adds 2 gateways of its own. It's actually quite a common situation that happens in PvP if both players have good scouting information, is just to mirror and react, and in this case I'm actually quite surprised that Stardust is pulling quite so far back against an inferior force here. I would expect that the kiting would be sufficient to prevent Banana Brain from gaining any territory, but now with this ramp funnel, but Banana Brain realizes that the army is much greater for Stardust, despite the fact that it is behind in supply overall. It is behind 3 workers. So now we have relatively even forces. 5 Zealots, 1 Dragoon against 4 Dragoons, 1 Zealot. That Dragoon was very weak. 5 and 6 now. These are common interactions they see in human versus human play, but Banana Brain is continuing to retreat and take stray hits on these Dragoons. Zealot's going to come forward, try to take some shots. It does tank quite a few, but the Dragoons were not in a good position to really capitalize on it, and now we see a kiting battle between the 2 players. Stardust seems to be coming out on top in a moment, but then Banana Brain, being closer to its resupply route, ends up taking the advantage there and is going to start pushing back. But now it is Stardust who is going to be ahead in this tug of war given the army sizes. 5 Dragoons, 1 Zealot. 1 Zealot being added, interestingly enough, again, but it's not in a good position for this engagement, getting trapped between Dragoons, not able to soak up any shots. And actually, in fact, Stardust wasn't even interested in the Dragoon, in the Zealot. They were focusing on shooting the Dragoons, which are now much lower health on average than Stardust are. Zealot leading the way now is going to soak up some hits here and allow for this Dragoon to get picked off. Very beautifully done by Banana Brain. And the Dragoons are chasing down the Zealot, it seems. It looks like they're looking for stray shots. 2 Dragoons are kind of dangerously forward, though. They could be pulled back on an attack, but this doodad, I think, is actually really hampering Banana Brain's ability to manage this engagement, and it is forced to retreat yet again. But Stardust winning again starting to win in the tug of war yet again. However, it should be noted, Banana Brain did save up enough money for a Nexus and is actually a full 8 workers ahead. Maybe it is because, there it is, it's the Forge in the Cannon option. It's playing safer while also focusing more on production, whereas Banana Brain clearly have a much more mid-game oriented mindset. But now seeing this amount of Dragoons, it's going to have to fall back, and it doesn't have much to fall back on. It does have 1 gateway less production, and now the numbers are actually starkly contrasted. Stardust at more than double the army and nearly double the army supply out on the field right here. Regrouping Banana Brain is right here, but again, the Zealot's not quite in the opportune position, and now it might have been the time to start focusing more on Dragoon production. It's actually going more heavily into Zealots, and it's forced back up its ramp. The Dragoons are getting blocked here by those same Zealots, and these Dragoons managed to take down quite a few with superior targeting and movement at the moment, and superior numbers, to be fair, as well. It is going to push it. The Nexus has been cancelled. Nope, never mind, my bad. It's just not being shot at, sorry. Kind of a slow trickle here is going to cost 1 Dragoon for Stardust, and it seems like now the Zealots are going into attack, but with Dragoon numbers this large, they're not going to be able to soak up very many hits for very long. The Dragoon count is dangerously low for Banana Brain, adding another gateway here to try to keep up with production, pulling probes to try to keep up with the engagement, but unfortunately it seems like Banana Brain has gotten brained by Stardust, and it's 4 gate Dragoon all in. I mean, I think that what we're seeing here is that Dragoons are incredibly good in the hands of AI in potentially all 3 matchups, and maybe 4 if you count random, but we haven't seen that yet here today. I'll take a look at the clock after I'm done with this game and see if I can maybe fit in a random game from Stardust as well, if it is available. So yeah, it looks like Stardust, it's basically just Dragooning its way to the top of the ladder for Basil, and it's going to be interesting to see if there's any kind of response from the other AI developers, if we're going to see some updated code, maybe incorporating different builds that may abuse this build, because even though it did go Forge and Cannon, it was quite late. A DT opener could have easily stopped this, but then again, you have to also consider the fact that there is a large amount of Dragoons out on the map, so it's hard to hold on until you get those DTs out. Perhaps perhaps holding the ramp until you get DTs is an option, but that also wouldn't fly on maps that are rampless, like that make it more difficult to hold what's called a tech opening. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, and it looks like Banana Brain has tapped out here. So yeah, I do think that there is potential for abusing these builds from Stardust. I guess it's a question of whether your opponent knows that it's Stardust. It's a question of what map you're on, and we're going to try to keep up with that and see what happens next. So looking at the clock here, I definitely have time for at least one more game. I'm going to use this table here to look for a matchup that Stardust may be interested in playing. Alright, so Purple Destiny is a random player. It's faring decently against Stardust, and it has some decent matchups. It's also 11th on the ladder, so let's see if we can... Oops, no, new window, new tab, there we go. Let's see if we can find a game between them, or at least we'll take any game against random, really. Looks like this is random Zerg against Legacy. We can look at that one maybe. Let's see if Kangaroo Bot random on Andromeda. Let's see. Let's take a look at how it fares against random. I mean, if you're going for a 4-gate Dragoon against all matchups, then perhaps it's not it doesn't really matter if you are against random or not, but it could be. It could be a factor. I'm going to be interested in seeing how it's going to scout in this matchup. So here on the bottom we have Stardust as the yellow Protoss, and at the top left of Destination we have Legacy playing as the orange Zerg after going random. And interestingly enough, not scouting with his Overlord, maybe a response to the fact that it is random, doesn't want to put the Overlord out on the map for early intel, and it looks like it's going for a 5 pool. So let's see how Stardust handles this 5 pool, because like I said before, I have seen AI react very defensively against this. Knowing that it's random, it's going to be interesting to see what it opts to do. It's going to still be Gateway. It looks like it's consistent on that front. And it's sending a probe now to Scout. So Gateway Scout, that's pretty typical in this for PVR. The map perhaps hurting Legacy a little bit, and in some ways, and helping in others. First of all, Stardust is going to know its Zerg very quickly, but Legacy is also not going to need to scout at all in order to send its army against Stardust. And it looks like Stardust was actually, pardon me, pulling the aggression from these Zerglings, which has delayed the rush a little bit, but it's still going to be a dangerous situation with 8 Zerglings out against 1 Zealot, no probes being pulled to block the ramp, and looks like no drones being made to follow up, and it was actually a 5 pool. First Zealot goes down really quickly, actually, and now there's 6 Zerglings in the main. Probe trying to make some space for itself. Zealot out here, and Nexus being harassed, Pylons being harassed. Zerglings can't seem to decide what to do, but the probes are all not mining right now. They're all being pulled. They were waiting for these 3 Zealots to come out. Great wait from Stardust, and now if Stardust just holds the ramp, it could thwart this this harassment quite well and be economically far ahead with 17 workers compared to 4, and it does secure the ramp at the moment. Looks like all but 1 Zealot are at full health, and with Zerglings continue to trickle in, I don't think that there's going to be any chance for our Zerg player to come back into this game. It would have to force a great mistake out of Stardust in order to do so, but Zealot count is continuing to grow. Now Dragoons are being added, and we're back to 4-gate Dragoon. So even cheese from a random rolled Zerg is not enough to stop Stardust to approach this matchup, which is 2 Gateway Zealots into 4, 5, 6 Gateway Dragoon on 1 base. Incredible. I'm pretty sure you can't support that many Dragoons off of 1 base. I think 4 is the maximum. Maybe it's an anticipation of building more later. I don't know, but I mean, it has cut workers even as well, so maybe because of the fact that it cut workers, it can get away with at least another gateway, but I don't know. That's something that greater minds than I, and I'm sure that's the creator of Stardust has considered that, and that they can in fact produce off of 6 gateways off of 1 base, which is quite insane if you ask me. We'll have to see. It was expanding behind this, something that we've seen consistently from it. As soon as it gains map control with its early army count, it takes more bases. So just in general, a very solid play from Stardust in a dicey situation. So let's take a look. The other replay was only 5 minutes long, so I have a good idea about what this is, and I'm sorry for the spoilers, but I am still interested to see how this game went. And again, this is Kangaroo Bot playing random, rolling Zerg, and here it is on the bottom right on Andromeda. And it looks like Kangaroo Bot actually just doesn't mind. That's Well, that's what happens sometimes, folks. I guess that does happen. So let's take a look at how it fares against a straight up pool from Chris Cox, which I know for a fact has great control. Let's take a look here. So Chris Cox spawning on the top left of Circuit Breaker as the purple Zerg, and Stardust on the bottom right spawning as the yellow Protoss. Cross map possession definitely being an advantageous position for Stardust here. Map is quite large. The entrance is somewhat large as well, though, so if it does go for a forge opening, it will have a hard time. But nope, it's just as we expected. We're having a pylon in the main base, and actually it's a pylon scout. Maybe, I think because it doesn't know, because it knows it's Zerg, it goes pylon scout. It would, I think it would have been more consistent to go pylon scout against random as well then, but maybe it's also a factor of the map because of the fact that it knows that it's 4 bases, it has less time to scout, so it has to scout earlier. That could be an interesting consideration. I'm wondering if the bot author did that, and if anyone wants to find out, I'm sure that you can go into the Discord and ask. So the 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 probe definitely knows what's going on now. It sees the Zerglings, but it's actually Chris Cox that isn't aware of where his opponent is. The drone taking so long to find the opponent because of the size of this map and being a 4-player map, but now it is here. Has located its opponent, sending all of its Zerglings forward, and again we have a similar situation to before where Stardust has 1 Zealot on the ramp against 8, soon to be 8 Zerglings. Now it's actually 10 Zerglings on the ramp, and first Zealot goes down, second Zealot being forced back, and actually has taken quite a bit of damage already. Probes being pulled. Probes actually managed to surround and take down all the Zerglings. Great control here from Stardust. Amazing, amazing control. That's something that you see from pro players at the human level at best. And now 2 Zealots on the ramp should be able to hold this. I do believe that the ramp on this map is actually slightly more annoying to wall on than something like Fighting Spirit, especially with these homebrew maps, homebrew ramps that are not part of the original game, that were made by authors, but now with 4 Zealots on the ramp, we are indeed going to see a very similar situation to last time, where it's going to pile up its army, it's going to add the gateways, and it's going to go 4 Gateway Dragoon, 3 gateways so far actually, maybe not 4th yet. Interesting. Probably pacing its production because of the fact that it suffered some economic damage early on, and now it's just going to build up a monstrous army, and we already know what's going to happen here, folks. It's going to go march across the map, kill the trickle of Zerglings as it goes, and arrive in the main base just to take it down. And the addition of the sunken colony is actually quite funny to me, because I think he would have benefited much more from having that drone mining and maybe adding a hatchery, expanding the economy. But after a 4 pool fails, especially with a drone scout, there's very little that you can do to climb back unless you did monstrous damage. So that was another quick game showing how Stardust continues to dominate the ladder with these quick games. Let's look at how it fares against. Let's see the cross table again. I want to see another top bot that we have available. So Krazio, Adias, Halpan. I tried to look for an Adias game, but I couldn't find one, unfortunately. Let's see. We saw Banana Brain, Steam Hammer, Microwave. I think I did see a Microwave game here. So let's see how a top-ranking Zerg player fares against Stardust. And actually, is it the top-ranking Zerg? No, second to Steam Hammer. But either way, where did I leave that? Okay, there we go. Icarus at the 12 o'clock position. We have Microwave as the brown Zerg, and at the bottom right, well, the bottom position, we have Stardust as the teal Protoss. And Microwave known Zerg, so this is a good opportunity for us to see if it's going to be Pylon Scout on a 4-player map again. It does look to be the case. 4-player map equals Pylon Scout from Stardust. Great decision making. And from Microwave, I believe I played this AI quite a while ago, so I'm not sure if it's changed yet, but yeah, Microwave generally goes for those macro openings, and this is going to be an interesting game to see because 12 hatch, as I said before, favored against, it's actually 10 hatch. This is actually, well, I think it might have been 9 hatch, but it's very close to the build that I was suggesting, which is 10 over hatch into 3 hatch Hydra, but it's 10 hatch, 10 pool. I'm sorry, 9 hatch, 9 pool. No speed. And drone manages to scout and actually slip by without getting hit somehow. I don't know how that happened. Again, it's the wide space ramps, but now the Zealots are going forward, realizing that without Zerglings really pressuring it. It has to do some pressure against this fast expansion. And with this amount of Zerglings, I'm going to be curious to see if the Zealots are actually capable of doing anything. This is part of the reason why hatchery first builds are quite strong against 2-gate. Firstly, because you get 2 hatcheries worth of Zergling production. Second of all, because you get early creep spread in your natural, which helps you build that sunken positioning. And Stardust, unabated. And actually, one thing I want to point out real quickly is that recognizing its situation, we saw in the previous games where it has gone up to like 6 Zealots or more. It's actually only gone up to 3 Zealots here and gone straight into Dragoon production. So great adaptation within the same build for Stardust. So on paper it might be the same, 2-gate Zealot, 4-gate Dragoon, but we see all these micro adaptations in the different scenarios that it faces on the ladder, the different builds that it sees. So we're going to see how this develops further. And actually it did make 3 more Zealots. So as I say that, it's quite an interesting choice. Maybe it's because it saw these extra Zerglings, it thought, maybe I could use with a few more Zealots. And it is still 4-gate Dragoon, still mass Zerglings from Microwave. It looks like it's going up to, is this a hatchery? Yeah, it looks like it's going up to 3 hatch, but this placement is not good for a Dragoon heavy build. So I want to talk about that very briefly. Normally why you build your hatchery here is then you put like a Hydra Den or an Evo chamber here, and on Icarus it's actually quite a narrow gap, and then you can place your Sunkens and Spores behind it, and that makes it incredibly difficult for Protoss, which is generally very Zealot heavy, to inflict any sort of damage, because you minimize the surface area around the Sunkens, which means that Zealots can't wrap around it very well. You can actually plug holes like this with like a couple of Zerglings or something while the Sunkens are just eating your Zealots. And it stifles a lot of very common early mid-game builds from Protoss. However, the difference is that we have Stardust going for Dragoons. Now what are Dragoons for? They can outrange any the hatchery and any wall you have here quite easily, and as a result, it's a bad investment against a Dragoon heavy Protoss, because if your wall goes down, all the money that you invested into going for a hatchery, including the drone and the lost mining time, are basically useless. It's only going to get a couple of rounds of production out of this hatchery before it goes down, I estimate. The Zerglings are being produced, and I don't believe that they have any speed yet, actually. Let me slow it down just to make sure. Yeah, these are definitely... I think these are slowlings, but the 6 Zealots, 5 of them in the front, controlling the Zergling surface area here, allowing the Dragoons to get amazing trades here. And now the kiting has begun. The amount of Zerglings, clearly not enough to handle the Dragoons getting kited. The number not sufficient to surround even if they wanted to, and the amount of Dragoons just overwhelmingly large. And now the slow trickle of Zerglings is not going to be able to do much. This hatchery at the very least is going to absolutely go down. And with 2 Sunkens positioned like this, I don't think they'll be able to hold much very long indeed. One Sunken trying to be placed at the front, at the time being ignored, but the Dragoons, focusing on the one Sunken that is actively doing damage, are going to walk into this base, and now it is almost all but over for Microwave as well. A high-ranked Zerg player going Zerglings off going 12 going expansion against 2-gate, which is an advantageous position usually. Maybe not properly reacting to the fact that it's Dragoon, and frankly I can see the difficulties now, and I think you guys can as well, having seen all these games where just mass Dragoons are destroying everything and everybody, why this AI is at the top right now. And I think we can just about call it quits for Microwave here, as it continues to hemorrhage Zerglings off of 1 base economy, and Stardust, as expected, going for its 3rd base behind this, using a map control and the pressure to expand behind it. Just overall solid play given the situations that it finds itself in. And with that, I am going to say goodbye to you all. I do encourage all of you to go check out the Discord, where you can see and discuss replays like this, players like Stardust, or rather AI like Stardust, and speak with their developers, discuss questions such as building placement for Terran, responses for Zergs against Dragoons. If you have any ideas, I definitely suggest you guys show up. All contributions are appreciated. People love talking about the game there, so if that's something you might be interested in, you should definitely come check it out. Thank you for joining me. My name is again Chobo Swaggins, or Jealous on Team Liquid, and this has been another SSCAIT report. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.